Peace and blessings. This is Misael Bay, aka Warlock Asylum, coming at you once again with another episode of Raw Talk. And wow, so a whole lot of events went down since I did a broadcast or whatever. And today we're going to talk about police brutality and what can American citizens do to end police brutality. And basically, I think everyone is well aware of what's been going on in the news with George Floyd and this dude getting murdered. Um, it's just crazy. Um, but it does bring a lot of questions up because there's police brutality, then there's racism, and it's kind of an interesting thing of how what events that really had nothing to do with George Floyd, but had a lot to do with the state of America that happened earlier in the week, probably added some uh, sort of resentment that just escalated into the situation. Police brutality has been going on for, man, for like a long time. And a lot of it it has a lot to do with law enforcement's history in the country because um, a lot of the first police officers in America were former slave catchers um, who formed a slave patrol, and then eventually they were hired because they did have skills of investigation into serving into police departments. So I don't know if it's sort of like um, it seems like there's never really been a fair shake as far as the situation with police and how they deal with um, minorities, and then you have just different situations like the 60s. You see hoses being turned on African American people, Latino people, Caucasian people who are participating in civil rights marches and stuff like that, and the police are firmly behind, really sticking it to these people, quote unquote. Okay, then we go further into some of the primes of the hip hop generation, and you have situations like Larry Davis where you had corrupt police. Um, you have situations like Amadou Diallo where a guy answers his door, and I don't know, he gets shot 41 times. How do you shoot someone 41 times? Right. So I think that in order for police brutality to happen, the police who were involved in administrating the deadly force unjustly must believe that there are two nations existing in America. They have that mental illness, right? Because when you look at cases, there are cases that are actually on film of how police handled Caucasian males who murdered and killed people in public view in the police presence. And those are situations where deadly force could be administered, and the police would just tackle them to the ground, but they would still have their dignity, until that person was tried and everything. So, what we're going to do before we even get into George Floyd and that sort of thing, we're going to look at a case of an individual who murdered someone right on television, a Caucasian man who murdered someone right on television, and how the police handled the situation without administering deadly force. And then we're going to come back and talk about that example and how it relates to the possibilities that police can take other alternatives and really get down to the hardcore root of how we can stop police brutality in America. So let's take a look at this clip right quick, and I'll be back in 1 second.
Captain Fritz. There is a person. There is Lee. He's been shot. He's been shot. Lee Oswald has been shot. There's a man with a gun. Absolute panic. Absolute panic here in the basement of Dallas Police Headquarters. The detectives have their guns drawn. There is no question about it. Oswald has been shot at point-blank range, fired into his stomach.
He is shot. He is shot.
Oswald. It is Oswald. Was that the man that shot the man, or do you know?
That is the man that shot the man.
Okay, so we see that here's a Caucasian male who committed one of the biggest crimes in history, and he committed homicide right on public television. He had a gun. There was no need to shout. The police was present. There was no need to shout, he has a gun, let's shoot him 41 times. There was no need for that. You see what I'm saying? They just tackled the dude to the ground. It caused a little bit of ruckus, but within less than a minute, the news correspondent was back on television again. You know, and the shooting of Lee Harvey Oswald, it kind of put a damper on the Kennedy investigation as far as finding out who assassinated President Kennedy. I think those things are known, just not in public circles. And maybe one day I'll do a video on it. However, for now, in regards to police brutality, it kind of shows how things are handled differently, even though that was a long time ago. So sometimes people, when they look at the news, they say, hey, man, that dude had a gun. I mean, one thing we don't want to get into is demonizing the police department. You know, someone commits a crime, someone's wielding a gun, you know, it's a strong possibility you can get killed, especially if you're a person, you know, who's of a certain sort of descent. But it's just sad because of how things could be handled. Um, so why has police brutality went on so long? You know, why has it went on so long? Why aren't there being any measures to stop it? I mean, when I look at the situation with George Floyd, you know, it's kind of crazy because you're dealing with a city being burned down and the president of the United States, I think he handled some things cool. However, in this situation, you know, what was really a bummer is that he comes out and signs an executive order about social media while city is burning down to the ground. Like, why hasn't anyone signed an executive order on the extent of police brutality? You see what I'm saying? And here's the reason why police brutality has continued up until today, and it will continue past George Floyd, which we're going to get into in a little bit, and then we're going to talk about how it could be stopped. Okay. The reason why police brutality exists is primarily because of racism. And that's why it hasn't been stopped. And it's not because people generally don't think, hey man, what this dude is wrong. That's not right. You shouldn't kill a person. But the thing is that for immigrants who come to this country, for people who are in the country, there's always this underlying notion that you have to pick a side. Very few people in America really have an objective view of what's going on. So a person could be from a country that has nothing to do with colonialism, right? They could be from Romania. People are sleeping in the sewers in Romania. And there's beautiful people, very beautiful people. And there's people who are very advanced, but they have their own struggle, is why I'm saying this. And these people come over here And they're just trying to survive. They're trying to make ends meet, trying to provide for their families, but they have to pick a side. And then they look at the side and they're like, hey, well, I look more, European or whatever. And okay, I'm on this side. And they don't realize what they're getting themselves into. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you have an African dude come over and he's like, I'm not black, you know what I'm saying? I don't want to, I'm different than what they are. I want to work, what I mean? I want to do some stuff or whatever. And then eventually he starts figuring some other things out and he's on another side, right? And so when these things happen, it's about sides. It's not about, this is a human being. And so what Americans first have to realize is that race and racism are hand in hand. You have to exuberate racial classification to exuberate racism. And ironically, a lot of times people see me talking about Moorish Americans, like, yo, man, this dude, he's a warlock. Why he talking about all of this kind of stuff? Because they don't believe in race. So they're taking a progressive step. And they're a group that are classified as Black Muslims wrongly because they don't believe in race, right? That sort of thing. And until America poses as a society where everyone stands justly as who they are, but when you have prominent figures, you know, saying stuff sideways, it gets a little bit crazy. You see what I'm saying? Race and racism. Let's just get this straight since we're on the topic before we proceed. Race and racism, right, are colonial constructs. So anyone who subscribes to the belief, and it's tough for people to swallow, but it's an actual truth, of racial classification are quasi racist, right? Let's put that out there. And those people who subscribe to, there's no way that you can subscribe to racial classification and not see things from a colonialist point of view because that's when it was created. So if you come from overseas, right, and let's say a person says, hey, I'm Romanian, that's what you should be because that's what your culture is. But you don't have to subscribe to the white and black caste system that exists here. So if a person wants to be, hey man, I'm African American, you could be African American, but you don't have to be in the black and white caste system that the colonialists made to keep money in a certain dynamic, right? You could be an Italian American, you could be an Irish American, or you could just be an American. You know what I'm saying? Why not? Let's just cut to the chase. But if you want to get into that game, these are some of the things that are going to happen. So what happens is a person who is part of the white subscription society, they're going to critique because they don't want to feel that the media's putting out that white people are killers. So now they're going to look at the victim. What was the victim doing? Oh man, he was doing this. He took a box of cigars and he got killed. Oh well, so this dude got a death penalty for a box of cigars, and you justify it, right? So why don't we just bring the death penalty back then? On the other side of the coin, you know what I'm saying? The focus in the quote unquote ethnic community, African American community, it becomes to check these people to make sure that they don't do anything. So the N word can cause so much havoc, but when it comes down to the basic essentials for economic prosperity, that's not important. It's important who's using the N word. And these are the things that racial classification create because you decided to live in a modern society and take a colonialist view and look at reality. That's why the things happen, right? This is why it happens. And I'm not saying, because sometimes people are like, man, what's this dude talk, crazy stuff or whatever. But if you want to see something in, you have to look at it objectively at its core, why it's happening. You live on the same land, eating the same food, And you know what? Let's just go into the week now, because there were some other things that happened before we get into this conversation with police brutality. Um, a lot of y'all know, and you can see on my feed, I had did a video about how most European Americans and quote unquote African Americans are related. Most of them are related, right? And so the situation in Central Park with this woman Amy Cooper and this other dude Cooper, like they distant cousins or whatever, more than likely. But this woman feels a certain way. So let's go into the beginning of the week. Let's go into some of the things that could have set this off, because we hear a lot of things in the news lately with the COVID-19 and the COVID-19 hitting the quote unquote black community hard. People are already distressed because they have to bury their parents, brothers, sisters, friends, cousins, aunts. And it's not like you can even have a regular funeral like that, as well as everyone else who's suffered a loss due to COVID-19, right? Okay, so this is going on. Then all of a sudden, you hear about, and this is within a span of 2 weeks, you know what I'm saying? It's not anything broad. So then all of a sudden, you start hearing about this guy in Georgia who gets shot jogging, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, oh man, man, what's going on down there? Because, Georgia, they got issues. You know what I'm saying? That's like the old South. So they got issues. So people are like, man, that's messed up. Let's pray for his family. Quote unquote, black and white Americans are upset about this thing. But it's like, okay, this is something that happened, and hopefully, it will be resolved. You understand what I'm saying? Okay. However, it was the arrest that happened in May, but the actual killing happened 2 months prior. And then we find out that the guy that had the video, he was kind of involved in it. You see what I'm saying? Okay, so that's where the thing goes down. All right. Next thing, Joe Biden, right? Joe Biden, his big mouth, right? Joe Biden comes out and he says to Charlemagne the God that he's in an interview with this guy. He says, "You ain't black." Like in the context that you ain't black um, if you can't decide to vote for him. And the sad thing about all of that is that there's a certain sort of consensus in some areas of the quote unquote African American, quote unquote black community that Biden is the less of two evils. And I don't know, like I don't know if every month you say something about black people, because this has happened over the past 9 months. It's like every month this dude says something about quote unquote black people, and then he has to retract it, and then black people are saying like, you know what, he's a better pick. Like, yo, if you say something every month, and he's saying stuff like, well, most African American parents can't read anyway. Like he's saying this type of stuff, and then you just keep excusing the guy. I don't get it. Why would you do something like that? Why would you feel that obligated to the guy? He tells Obama, "Oh, you have to be whiter than white for people to accept you." Like Biden's mouth is retarded. But I don't get what's all the support for the dude. Like, is an antithesis to get Trump out of office. But I know one thing: the difference between Trump and Biden is this. And you could take it however you're going to take it. Trump says something, he's not going to back down on what he's saying. Biden says something, 2 hours later, I shouldn't have said that. How can you lead the country 2 hours later, I shouldn't have said that? You know what I'm saying? And that's why when you look at the fact that he was Obama's vice president, he served as vice president during Obama's administration. But here's the thing: after like the first month or whatever, Obama had that dude pushed to the back. You didn't really see Biden because Obama knew if this dude opens his mouth, it's going to be chaos. So all what Obama did is he went to the 99-cent store and got Joe Biden a spatula to cut cake at press conferences. And that was his whole job during the entire 8 years he was in office, is to sit back and cut cake at press conferences. Every time you see him, he's in the back cutting cake at a press conference because he was like, yo, man, if I get this dude's mouth on, he's not going to speak. So now you voting for this dude. Here's the ironic thing of this stuff. His lead pick, Joe Biden's lead pick for vice president, is this woman, Amy, I think the last name is Kovalka. And she had the opportunity to prosecute the lead police officer who had his knee on the guy's neck. She had the opportunity to prosecute and passed it up. So when you hear about this, like, man, this dude got all these complaints, know that that's in that Democratic circle. They could have squashed that a long time ago. But I don't get, like, why this dude got to say something about quote unquote African American people every month, and in the course of that, he got to take it back, and then African American people, like, man, in some ways, some of this stuff happens because and not, I shouldn't say that, but some things happen because people feel they could take advantage of you. You ain't got to vote for somebody. A lot of people in a lot of communities around the city, there's a place called Chinatown. And in them places called Chinatown, there's some people who don't even speak English, never speak English, don't read English, and they don't vote. And their communities operate the way they need to operate because voting, they don't need to vote because they run their community. You focus on running your community, you don't need to entertain these characters. You see what I'm saying? Voting is for people who don't run their community. You know what I'm saying? You run your community, this dude can mouth off and say whatever he want to say, and you that despicable, that needy, that you have to vote for him to get someone else out of office, and they're just using you. You know what I'm saying? You don't get it. You're being shot in the street by the police, and you think your vote can change something. I don't get it. That's silly. You all this stuff that's going on now is about people feeling disempowered, not being respected, and you think your vote can change something. But anyway, I don't even want to get into that conversation. But this dude, Joe Biden, he just always sets an ill tone for me. You know what I'm saying? There's always something ill with him. And then he comes on thinking that he got good credit in the Black and Latino community because he looks like a bastard member of the Kennedy family doing Polydent commercials. You know what I'm saying? Touching on the girls and all this crazy stuff. Like a dude who's like, I'm just having poking good fun out there with people. You know what I'm saying? I have no taste in my mouth for Joe Biden, B. You know what I'm saying? Like that whole thing, you're getting played because you don't have to. That's like asking a Jew to vote for someone in the Nazi party to make it easier. If the dude keep retracting his statements, what can he do as president? I done found 5 to 6 statements this dude Joe Biden comes out and says out of his mouth, and he retracts within 24 hours. But you want to make him president because it's going to be easy. That's a sign that's worse. And then what I don't like, you look into the news media, right? So you look in the news media, and they start talking about this thing about George, the protests, George Floyd, and then they start talking about who handles what better. Like they're not even interested in the purpose of the protest. It's just about making everything is all about making this dude Biden appear to be the pick by gaining some sort of pool amongst African Americans. It's like yo man, Biden, Biden said this, but Trump, he did this. Everything Biden does, that's criminal. Like not criminal, but everything he does that's just like crosses people the wrong way. The first answer that they give, well, Trump, no, he should be accountable for what he said. Trump is not part of the conversation on that level. He should be accountable for what he says. You know what I'm saying? So what happens? He gets into the White House and he's still popping stupid stuff. He doesn't have the spatula that Obama gave him to cut cake. he has to now act responsibly, and he starts saying stuff. You're going to talk about, well, Trump's, like, that's stupid. No, he should be accountable for who he is. You know what I'm saying? And he's running for president. He should be accountable for who he is. But all he's doing is just using you. You're getting gunned down in the street, and you think your right to vote can change something. I mean, so that dude, to me, he starts saying stuff every single month about African American people, and then retract the statement within 48 hours. And then every time a newscaster comes up, they want to talk about Biden. As long as you melanated, it's like every single newscaster wants to talk about Joe Biden. So the quote unquote white liberal community, once again, wants to use the minority community to put this dude in office, and it's not going to answer your question. It's not going to change the situation in police brutality, and it's not going to create more opportunities for minorities. Okay. I'm going to get into that in a second. Okay. So that was that incident. And that just threw a wrench in my work. Not so much, like, some of it was what Biden said, but I was kind of used to what Biden says. But a lot of it was this dude, the reaction he got from the African American community. Okay, I had to pause it for a second, but I just wanted to jump into that back again. So the next situation is this woman, Amy Cooper. This dude is watching birds in Central Park, an African American dude. I think his name is Christian Cooper. So it's possibly that they may even have the same lineage. Who knows? But anyway, she doesn't see that. She just sees this, quote unquote black dude sitting around watching birds. And I guess, they get into some discourse about her dog. And all of a sudden now, he's videotaping her. And she's like, I'm going to call the cops for you. And I feel threatened. And at first I thought that. I was like, man, that must be like a YouTube enactment video or something like that. And I was like, wow, that's the real video. This woman is that dumb, right? But then the idea, like, her actions actually said something else to me, because what made her think that she had carte blanche to call the police and dude wasn't doing anything? Like, it's a risk, I would think, calling the police and falsely reporting that someone is trying to threaten you or take your life. But she felt fully liberated in New York City, in Central Park, during the COVID epic. She felt fully liberated picking up that phone and saying that a black man was threatening her life. You know what I'm saying? You know what, man? Those animals that I see people with in the streets, the sad thing about it is that, here's the thing, someone has an animal, someone goes up to them like, hey man, that's a nice dog. And then as soon as they turn around, they're grabbing their purse when they see your face. That's sad. That's sad. But then she's calling the cops, saying this crazy stuff, and she got fired eventually, because who wants to deal with that? Who wants to deal with a lawsuit and boycotts and stuff like that? But ultimately, here's the situation with that sort of thing. I think if the lady lives in a Minneapolis or in a town that was sort of rural, she might be able to get a job there. But in the big cities, the scenario of colonialism is starting to diminish for both white Americans and black Americans. And here's why. It's because you have people who don't really identify as black or white, who are coming over to America with big bags of money, opening up businesses and stuff like that. And they're coming in and this is their situation. We just trying to get this work done. We own this company. We're trying to get this work done. And this stuff that you Americans had going on before we got here, we ain't down with all that stuff. We just want to treat humans and have the best experience possible. You know what I'm saying? And so those companies are primarily in big major cities. So when you work for one of those companies, you could be more than likely, a lot of these companies are in the work of IT. And you work for one of those companies, you have a nice job, and it's real easy. You could work home 3 times a week. I mean, even before the COVID thing, you work in IT. Hey, I can work from home. I can operate a computer remotely and all this crazy stuff. You got a nice salary. You can really live good. And then you somebody from the Midwest, and you only seen a couple of black people a few times in your life, and someone starts talking to you about putting your dog on the leash, and then you sitting here talking about you're going to call the cops. Well, the company that you work for, they don't have that type of sympathy because they're not involved in that experience. And then all of a sudden now you feel this stream of light similar to Joe Biden, right? Similar to Joe Biden, where you feel you have to apologize within 24 hours. And what I said wasn't racist, but I was sitting there on the phone emphasizing that it was a black dude that was threatening me. And these are the people that walk around and on face glance, they're respected. They're respected. Like, hey man, that person's working hard. They got a nice apartment. They got to go on. Like that sort of thing. They respect it, but really, they're living in some okey doke world or something like that. You know what I'm saying? So that happened, right? And then it was just like, so we had the, the thing with Atlanta. We had some streams of another situation that happened in March, but the case is coming up with these cops busted into this woman's house, and she was an EMT worker and got killed and all this crazy stuff. That was another thing on the grill, but that didn't happen in the 2 weeks from May I'm talking about. But it is worth noting. So all these things are happening. Somebody goes into, you know, a Target or some store in San Diego, Ku Klux Klan hood. Like all these things are being reported in the news. Like every single day, there is a Klan influence. They're finding Klan literature, all this crazy stuff, right? And next thing you know, you have this situation where this guy gets arrested. He wasn't resisting the arrest. And there's 4 cops involved. They take the guy down. The guy puts his knee on his neck, and he sits the dude down for 8 minutes. If a person wasn't resisting arrest, why does he even have to go to the ground? I don't get it. I'm saying. On top of this, the people that are involved, the DA, all the sort of things, he comes on the podium, the DA of Minneapolis, and he says, wow, this is the fastest time that we've acted in response to a case of police brutality. I don't even know Minneapolis has a history of responding to cases of police brutality. That's a whole other conversation. But on top of that, he says, we acted fast. And then they charge the guy with third-degree murder. Third-degree murder is a case where you're trying to administer force, but it's not with the intent of killing. But if someone's telling you that they can't breathe, and your knee is still on their neck, and you got 4 guys who are really on top of the dude who wasn't trying to resist arrest, it might be possible you might have been trying to kill the dude. It's just that simple. Why would 4 law enforcement officers be on someone's body who wasn't trying to resist arrest? Most people who aren't trying to resist arrest, when they're being dealt with by honorable police officers, they're just put in handcuffs and escorted to the car. That's it. There's no, hey, let's get in the middle of the street and let's practice wrestling, taekwondo. It's just you just get in the car, come to the police station, we'll ask you a few questions, charge you, do whatever needs to be done. But there's no, crazy stuff like, you know, um, hey man, let's get into the middle of the street. We're going to take you down and make it into something else. And then you have another officer. He's just looking around like he doesn't know what's going on. Maybe he's not down with it, but he ain't saying nothing. You know what I'm saying? So I had to really sit and think about this because this situation has triggered protests in every city. And I said to myself, it's good to see people come out. And was the amazing thing about this experience in a way uh, that is a little bit encouraging as far as the public reaction is that you see people of all different backgrounds coming out. So I think the good thing about the Corvid thing, although it's a horrific event, but it affected everybody. So people, they're not really into this, you're not American, I am American atmosphere. It's not the tone really on that sort of thing. But everyone sees like, yo man, you murdered this dude. You know what I'm saying? Like you murdered the dude. Okay. So everyone's coming out, which they should because all of us are Americans. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes people say, hey man, what are you doing for your community? Well, if you're an American, my community is your community too. And that's how it works. Right? It's so much easier without the racial classification, isn't it? So this is a good thing that we see going on, right? However, I don't know how this is going to evolve, and I'm going to say why. Outrage should be expressed. Outrage should be expressed. Looting, those things should not go on. But you do want to express your outrage through protest. But looting, criminal activity, that sort of thing ain't good. And cops, they have to take a lot of heat because of situations like this. So now let's talk about ways in which police brutality could be reduced. The most effective way to reduce police brutality is to speak for police officers themselves to speak out against it. You see what I'm saying? Even on a situation where you have tensions between people of Black and Latino descent who they understand that police officers have a good job. Everyone understands this, right? They have a tremendous responsibility in the community. The people I know who have African American and Latino descent, everyone understands that in the room. You see what I'm saying? I don't think that's a question of not understanding that. I think, though, however, that regardless of that consensus, there's always, because you see a lot of police brutality in the news media and on television, it exists. There's always this consensus, which is what it should be, is that could be me. You see what I'm saying? Now, one thing police officers could do is to speak out against police brutality, to speak out against any underlying gang activity enacted by police, right? Because here's the situation. In 2005, you had an FBI report that went into Congress, and the report was pretty much about a huge amount of white members of white supremacist groups was entering law enforcement. Now, that report was made when George Bush Jr. was in office. That report was never noted by George Bush Jr. It wasn't noted by President Obama, and it was never noted by President Donald Trump. And it was never cited by Hillary Clinton. It was never cited by Joe Biden. So I don't really expect Washington, D.C. at this point to strategize any resolve for police brutality. I have no faith that that would happen. What I do think is that the citizenry and the police department can kind of come get to resolve. And if it is true that there are members of white supremacist groups in law enforcement, I think the first effort to reduce criminal activity amongst police has to happen in the major cities because other cities and rural areas is a lot connected. And from those connections in the major cities, then maybe things could branch out. Also, I would like to suggest that a lot of times, um, we could easily feed into the drama because it's almost like a gang activity. You see someone who's like a wisdom seed like myself or whatever, brown skinned dude, dark skinned dude, light skinned dude, whatever, and we walking around and you see someone dressed in blue. And they're not like, hey, how you doing, officer? Keep up the good work. They're just kind of like grilling each other. You know what I'm saying? In some way, some officers would try to speak, right? Whatever the case may be. But it would be great to see a concerted effort. Like I live in New York City, so sometimes when I would go to Union Square, I would see police officers and bookstores, like, maybe that area in Union Square, there's things that go on, but it's not a high crime area. So sometimes, officers could walk around. Maybe they could stand, talk to security at Barnes and Noble's bookstore and stuff like that. I don't want to cut into the grain of that because they have their own routine and stuff. However, it would just be nice just to see like some police officers go to a school that's populated by African American and Latino children and just talk to them. You know what I'm saying? To kind of break down this wall that a lot of people have used to their advantage and that neither side really benefits from. If you're serving a community, man, and you can't even talk to the people in the community, how are you serving the community? Like all this stuff is going on. Let's just make a starting point because Amadou Diallo is a huge case, but that would really be disrespectful to the people who were killed in my father's day or his father. But let's just say we started from there. How many cases of police brutality has happened since 1999? And nobody has ever been seen on the news media from law enforcement going into a school to talk about the responsibilities of a police or how concerned they are about the young people in that neighborhood. No police officer has ever done that on camera. I don't know. Because one time I heard Giuliani say something like, and he was referring to African American people, and he was referring to police brutality. And this is what sets the tone. Giuliani kind of set the tone for police brutality, its increase. And Giuliani, um, it should be noted that he did that. Giuliani did some good things, but he also did some tragic things because he could have, first of all, let's just take it back a little bit more. The situation with Larry Davis. Larry Davis was a guy, he was like a guy trying to make music, trying to get a studio together or something. And he needed some extra money. So he started hustling for the cops. And he was in the Bronx. So what happened was he would hustle drugs and do other type of jobs for police officers who would lift the drugs from busts that they did and resell it in the streets to make money, right? But after a while, Larry, he was just tired, man. Like, I don't really want to deal with all this crazy stuff. So he was like, nah, I ain't messing with this no more. So they came to execute this dude because, like, yo, if this dude talks, you know what I'm saying? It's going to be hot on us. So he was able to get out of a situation as a single individual. He was able to kind of like, really ward himself off like so many different police officers. But the problem was, by the time that they came for Larry, they had already made him like one of the most wanted men in America. And he was working for the cops. You know what I'm saying? Okay. So this thing goes on. So Giuliani comes in, and all of a sudden, he's 100% behind the NYPD. But when you have cases like Larry Davis, when you have cases like Amadou Diallo, why you didn't perform an investigation? You know what I'm saying? If you're hearing these cases, it doesn't mean that you're un-American or that you're not a politician that serves the honor of justice and equality to just make an investigation. That's nothing wrong with that. And so when people who are oppressed start seeing politicians back someone who has wronged them or a department or whatever the case may be, and they're just blind eye to it. Yes, law enforcement is supposed to keep civil unrest, but even as an individual, you want to check like, yo, man, maybe these dudes might be doing something dirty. So if you start hearing reports about this, maybe you need to investigate that instead of just giving it like, no, I'm 100%. That doesn't make you right, or doesn't make you in the pursuit of good, because all citizens should enjoy life and liberty. You know what I'm saying? And what I don't get about all of this sort of thing, and I'll get more into the solutions after this, is you're dealing with people who are on the economic negative side. You're dealing with people who are poor, and so certain behavior patterns, certain elements have always followed people who were not economically empowered. And if you're economically empowered, you have that knowledge. You know what I'm saying? You should be trying to get people on board, because if America had two classes, rich and middle class, it'd be a whole different type of society, right? But if you want to keep the poor poor, you know what I'm saying? And I've seen how they do it. I used to live in Spanish Harlem, and I hope this didn't start with the Giuliani era, but wouldn't be surprised if it would. So I would go to work. I would leave. I think I would leave like about 8 o'clock at the time. I would get to work at 10, and I was on the 6th line, so I would catch the 6 at 116th Street, go one stop up to uptown, and catch the 125th downtown because it was running express. It would be a faster ride that way. So I would do that or whatever. Then one day I was on vacation, and I had to go to the train station to get a new Metro card for something, and I noticed the machines for the Metro card wasn't working. I was like, wow. And then I was on vacation that whole week. I said, let me investigate this. So what I found out, this will blow your mind, is that what they would do is they would like manipulate the machines so that people couldn't get regular transactions, and that would encourage people to jump the turnstiles. And then at 11 o'clock, they would reset the machines back to normal. Why would you do that in a place like Spanish Harlem? Why would you do that at 116th in Lexington? Every morning, the machine don't work, and then miraculously at 11 o'clock, it works again. Like, why would you do that? People are trying to get to work, and they're working like either minimum wage or above minimum wage, or they're just doing what they're doing to get ends meet. And you're making a racket out of this, but you're not doing that in Midtown or in some of the richer communities. Why would you want to do that just to get a ticket? You see what I'm saying? I don't know, man. But I would say this though: the level of police brutality in certain communities is not going to go down, even after the George Floyd incident. I'm going to tell you why. Because a lot of the trappings of what happened in this situation has raised high emotions. But in order for something to make a permanent progress, it has to be done independently from an emotionally charged situation. Now, if you watching this video and y'all decide, like, you know what, man, we're going to stick to our guns on this one, then it can happen. But when you look at like situations like Larry Davis or Amadou Diallo, those were emotionally charged Eric Gardner situations. And after, a cop gets convicted and then he's later released 3 years later, it just dies down. You know what I'm saying? The taxpayers' money is used to give the family um, compensation maybe 10 years later or something like that. But really, as far as the political system, no one really cares. They just try to sweep it under the rug. So now, if you're going to ride with these candidates and they don't talk anything about people being mistreated by law enforcement because the way they look, then your vote doesn't mean anything. I wouldn't even engage in this election, to be honest with you. But not to digress too much, but let's just get it back to where it was. So police officers have to get involved because the politicians ain't. You know what I'm saying? Giuliani came out and he said, not in this incident, but I heard him say years prior that in the discussion about um, black police brutality in black neighborhoods, he attacked black people. He said it's in their music. That's like me attacking the Italian mafia because of what I see in Goodfellas. It's in their films. Martin Scorsese did this film. Like, yo, this is what the politicians are saying. So I don't expect the politicians at this point to deal with police brutality. I don't expect the president to deal with that thing. I don't expect a future president to deal with that thing. I don't expect the vice president to deal with that thing. Only thing I would expect is for police officers and people in the community to try to build a better relationship with each other. You know what I'm saying? There's ways that it can be nipped in the bud, number one. But I don't know if people are really willing to go to those extremes. But I will talk about them because as a shaman, we deal with this in shamanic societies. Okay. And I'm going to talk about that one day too, because I think in the fall, our shamanic society will be open to take in new people. But basically, what has to happen to just ill regard all of this, uh, and it will also be a solution for racism, is that racial classification and racism have to be classified as the same unit, right? Then from that, it has to be classified as a psychiatric disorder. And how it would be classified, because we hear people say racism and illness, but it's not in the terms of a psychiatric disorder. Now, people say, hey, man, that's a far fetched idea. But people forget that homosexuality during the 50s was classified as a psychiatric disorder. If you was found in that situation, you might have to go to a psychiatrist. Today, it's a different situation. People recognize it as a viable sexual preference, and people who have those preferences can even get married in a lot of states, right? Okay. So the idea that racism is a mental illness is not something far fetched. And a chronic mental illness is not far fetched at all. But that has to be done. It has to be done. And why is it has to be done? Is because once it becomes a chronic mental illness, it could people who have jobs as public servants, civil servants, politicians, anything dealing with responsibility and oversight with people or serving the community, they could be tested if they have that mental illness. And that's how that can be resolved. On this plane right now, um, hopefully justice will be brought. The protests and things like that, peacefully protesting and stuff, it could bring about a change in the condition of the case. But as far as a change in the condition of police brutality, not until police officers get involved and people in the community and community leaders get involved to say like, you know, to create some dialogue between each other. You know what I'm saying? Other than that, you got to make racism a mental illness. You got to make it a chronic mental illness so that people can get tested for it. And those tests will determine what type of jobs they would get. You see what I'm saying? Because people are not that evolved right now. People, as soon as they hear something, they want to defend it, because they feel that they're part of this classification. So let me see what's going on because I'm not this way. But if you're not really that way, why did you take the classification? knowing who made it, right? That's another question. Or are you just trying to fit in? You know what I'm saying? This is a crossroads in human history that we're living in. It's a crossroads in human history. So anything that goes against what has to happen in the crossroads is going to blow up in your face. And that's why so many things are happening this year, because it's a crossroads. You see what I'm saying? This year is 2020, right? And 2020 add up to 40, and 40 is the number of the Sumerian goddess Enki, who was the god of the crossroads, right? He was he was also, the deity that made it rain for 40 days, because that's his number, 40. That's another situation. But not to get too far fetched with it, but it's the crossroads time. This is the crossroads for this world. It's not a doomsday, it's just a crossroads. So it's going to ring in a new era. There's been other crossroads. The wars, World War One and Two, that period was a crossroads. Okay, this is a crossroads that we're dealing with, and it's unfortunate that anytime something happens, these dudes is always trying to get into some black and white stuff, just basically some black stuff, um, and a lot of, some of it, I mean, these crimes should be reported. You know what I'm saying? It's horrific, some of the stuff that's going on, and just the fact that a city's got to be burned down just for some dude to get arrested who had something to do with the death of this individual. Like, I don't care if you like, what difference does it make? A cop is a job, right? It's not a status symbol in society. In a way, it is, because of the responsibility it implies. But when you really break it down, it's a job that has requirements. If you're doing a job and it's causing someone to die who wasn't really, in the line of some self-defense or something, how is that not a crime? You know what I'm saying? And, it's sad, because for people who take on the white classification in the colonialist category, some of them feel guilty, but it's not really you that did it, it's this dude that did it. But if you're going to take on that classification, you know, you have to realize that in some states, it ain't it ain't what it is. You know what I'm saying? It ain't what it is. Like, some states, like, you can come from Romania, you can come from Ireland, you can come from, different places in the UK, right? And you go to some of these states, some of these places in Georgia and stuff like that, they're not feeling all of that. They're not feeling Romania. They're not feeling Syria. They like, oh, this person, you ain't no American. And they'll bring it to you, that heat. But if you want to jump in the boat and get into this classification business and feel that you're part of this classification, and is there a way you can finagle some justification of what's going on, then you feeding into the philosophy of those colonialists. You're feeding into the philosophy of those because that's what it was designed for. You see what I'm saying? That's what it's designed for. They knew that this country is going to be a country of immigrants when it was developed. But how do we keep this agenda of Anglo-Saxon purity alive? We have to create a paradigm where people who are not Anglo-Saxons, who are Irish, Jewish, Italians, they have to come into agreement with a certain perspective of the defeated nations that reigned prior to the existence of the United States. So everyone, as they come over here, they get into a certain fit of agreement, and you don't even see what's going on now. Because at some levels, the reason why those groups of Jews, Italians, Irish, Albanians, all that sort of thing, were prejudiced against was because to the Anglo-Saxon tier, they were perceived as people of mixed blood. And so most of those people I know of those ethnicities have received racism in the United States. And that's telling you, you being used as part of a game also. You know what I'm saying? So just, trying to keep it, one ethnicity in the police force and all this other crazy stuff, you abide to an agenda that's only serving someone who's only using you. You know what I'm saying? And that's how that goes. But as far as, you know, George Floyd and the family, I just give my deepest respects for him and the family, man. It's just, man, it's crazy. And just one more note, I'm gonna see if I can get this, video uh footage. But a close friend of mine sent me a video footage of actually George Floyd speaking. Like I guess he was doing a video. Like a lot of times you see this clip of him. It's not really like a picture, but it looks like something he was on YouTube and someone, did a frame shot or whatever. He actually did the video, and the video was about black on black crime. You know what I'm saying? That's the type of dude. And he was just like, man, this is going to attract so much. And in some ways, he's so right, but then he gets killed in a situation that is something he probably wasn't even looking to do. Then we find out the cop that had the foot, his knee on the dude's neck, they used to work together in the same nightclub. I don't know what this is about, but this ain't good. Then I hear that the police saying that they gonna take the fifth and they not cooperating. This is not good. And if the powers that be in Washington think it could be ignored until the case starts, you in for a rude awakening, because astrologically, it ain't that time on this watch, bro. It ain't that time. You're gonna have to take a stand, and that's gonna determine whether or not America is gonna be in a state of civil unrest to the year 2021. You know what I'm saying? And that's dealing with the astrological powers, because that's the stage that's being set by the movement of the stars. You have 3 planets in retrograde. You have Venus, you have Saturn, and you have Jupiter. And you have Mercury about to go in retrograde in a couple of weeks. And what's going to happen, because Mercury retrograde, that's a heavy sign for Gemini, and President Trump is a Gemini, you're going to be put in a situation, homie. You're going to be put in a situation that you're going to have to make some choices as far as what you represent and really be a test of your leadership. As an astrologer, I know this. Right? As a shaman, I know this. So it's going to be, the summer will start fizzling out around August. It's when you will really start seeing some sense of normalcy return to the United States, but you will not see it return, because this is a whole different era that we're going into. So if you're of a person who was like a Generation X or early millennials list, where you remember when, what's that person name? Bill Clinton was in office. Nah, you're not going back to that, homie. It's going to be a whole different situation ahead, and it's going to be a lot of challenges ahead, because the movements of the government are not in sync with the future. You see what I'm saying? And to actually even put Biden in office, America will even face more karma. I say that. They'll face more karma, because that's going to be a great deception. If you put Biden in office, you're going to see foreign troops on U.S. soil. You know what I'm saying? Because these dudes have plans for the United States. You know what I'm saying? Foreign powers have plans for the United States. You know what I'm saying? It's no lie that we're not that amicable in the popular opinion of places around the world. But if you let the wrong guy in the office, you're going to really see some events escalate because there are forces that unfortunately which to do the U.S. harm. You know what I'm saying? And as an astrologer, what I see in the stars or whatever is that there's some things that are on the back burner that are about to come that this dude has to deal with that minorities don't have under control. You know what I'm saying? If you voting, I'm gonna say this one more time. It's the last time I'm gonna say this. If you're an African American or Latino and your priority in this world is voting, um, you're not in control if your people are being killed in the street by law enforcement, right? There's no control. Your vote doesn't really count. It's just used because you could be easily finagled. This dude saying stuff every month and you still gonna vote for him. You could be easily finagled, easily influenced. And those strategies are only put out there to manipulate you. You know what I'm saying? George Soros put $500 million and he invested $500 million to create bad press for George Bush Jr. Uh, during his second term. $500 million, $500 million he put in just to get George Bush not even out of office, but just to get his legacy tarnished. So when you see this thing with Biden and everything is Biden, because someone's putting money to manipulate your consciousness. You know what I'm saying? But if you let this dude in, I guarantee you that money trail will lead to someplace outside the United States. You know what I'm saying? Man, you're going to be in for a rude awakening. And as far as what's coming up during the Mercury retrograde, there's going to be another incident with the police. You know what I'm saying? Because this is what the stars are dictating. Mercury rules, also, it rules law enforcement. So when you see, you know, all this stuff going on and this retrograde coming, it's gonna, you know, for people of color, you have to hold on because in some ways the choices that you make in, they may seem correct, but it's it's not because you're feeding into someone else's agenda. You know what I'm saying? And yo, man, it's gonna be good. So just try to, you know, stay safe and you'll be all right. You know, I'm not hearing no doomsday message or whatever like that serious, but yeah, I mean things can get serious in some ways, and a lot of things going to escalate during the retrograde, and a lot of things going to be going on in the area of the White House. So, you know, just be prepared for that sort of thing. You know what I'm saying? But this is me, Sal Bay, aka Warlock Asylum, coming at you once again with another episode of Raw Talk, and we'll get back into business another day. All right, peace.